Am I next? Okay. I misplaced my bulletin somewhere. Did you take my bulletin? I thought you had things together. I just told Sandy. She asked me if I come down for the dedication for the offering. I said, no, I navigate those steps as a few times as possible because of my bad hip. And so this is a trick from your part, right? Yeah. Okay. I know that all of you, or most of you, my age anyway, have heard this in your life at some point. Someone said to you, "Are you saved?" I was thinking on the way up today, I thought about a guy named Bill Strickland. He was the pastor of the Independent Bible Church in Wayland, Iowa, who associated with nobody. They were glad to have you come to their special events, but they would go to nobody else's special events because they felt that their purity would be tainted by associating with some of us. Anyway, what was unique about Bill Strickland was he'd go around town in the spring and the summer with his window open of his car, and he'd toot his horn at people, and he'd shout out, "Lois, Sister Lois, are you saved?" He'd do this off and on all day as he drove around. Paulette and I used to playfully call him the horny preacher. Anyway, that's just Paulette and me. I liked Bill Strickland. He was a great, I liked talking to him, but he had his narrow view of salvation. I am one who tends to see it as a process, something that we grow up into. And so when Peter says that you're newborn, and like babies, you should crave nothing but milk, the spiritual honesty that helps you grow up in your salvation now that you've tasted the goodness of the Lord. There was a man. He was an ordinary man. In fact, there was nothing extraordinary about this man at all except for his great aunt. Now, she was truly extraordinary in many ways. Well, this young man had grown up, had left his community, and he hadn't seen this great aunt for years. And so you can imagine he wasn't all that upset when he learned that she had died. However, he became more interested when he learned that she had left him something in her will. Well, he thought to himself, golly, she wasn't rich, I don't think. She was humble, she was generous. He knew that much about her. But, who knows? Maybe she had wealth that nobody could imagine. So, by the time he went to the lawyers, he had all kinds of elaborate fantasies about what he might be getting from this great aunt of his. His hopes were only slightly dashed when he was given a key and a note. And the note said that he should go to his great aunt's flat, and this key was for a certain room in that flat, and there he would be, if he went there by a certain time, he could take whatever was in that room if he wanted it. So he went to that room, unlocked the door, and in there he found only a table and a pitcher. And he saw a note. This is what the note said. In this pitcher is the gold of God. You may empty it once a day, and it will always be full the next. But take care. For there's only one vessel which will hold this gold long enough for it to be of any use to you. Well, what could this mean? Is she joking? God's gold, what's that? He looked inside the pitcher. There was something kind of gold looking inside. But there was nothing else in the room, and she said I could take it. So he walked out with the pitcher and the note. And he went home, and what did he do as soon as he got home? He poured it in a plastic glass he had there. But as soon as the gold would be poured out and emptied from the pitcher, it lasts just long enough to start disappearing. And so by the time it was emptied from the pitcher, it also had disappeared from the glass. Well, okay. He waited till the next morning. The pitcher was full again. And so, to make a longer story shorter, you can imagine for the next weeks, he tried a new vessel every day. He hadn't been to church for years. He even snuck into the church one night and took one of the chalices, thinking that might be a sacred vessel. He poured it in, but the same thing happened. It disappeared as soon as it hit the bottom of the vessel. One day, he was holding a ornamental vase. Didn't have anything in it at that time. And he was pouring the contents of the pitcher into that vase, and he spilled some on his hand. He never thought about what would happen if he did that, and so he almost stumbled getting a towel to clean it off. And when he did get the towel, he realized and wiped it off quickly. There was just a slight warmth on his hand, but that was gone very, very soon. In this pitcher is the gold of God. You may empty it once a day, and it will always be full the next, but take care. There's only one vessel which will hold this gold long enough for it to be of any use to you. He went to bed that night. Couldn't sleep. Then it hit him. He thought what it was. He should have been terrified, but he wasn't. He got up in the morning, took the pitcher, and tipped it. He emptied it into himself. Years later, when this man died, his friends remarked, he changed not long after his great aunt died. Others recalled how his face shone like the sun throughout his life from then on. And others said that he lifted their faith on many occasions. Others called him a saint. As for his great niece, she wondered what it meant when she was left a key and a note from his will. Anyway, that's a story about God's gold. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Gary or Jenny has a slide I want to show you. How many of you have been there in Louisville at the corner of Walnut and 4th Street? Maybe some of you have. There's this signage there. Tells about Thomas Merton's epiphany he had at this corner in March 18th, 1958. That struck me when I saw that, not just because of what happened there, but the date. That's Paulette's birthday. Not in 1958. She was 11 years old on that day. And 2 months later, I was baptized. So it just was curious to me, epiphanies of Merton and my own story with Paulette. But what was important was maybe you can read it there. He was suddenly overwhelmed with the realization that I loved all these people. He found them walking around like the sun, shining like the sun, their faces shining like the sun. But they didn't know it. Here's what he writes in his journal after that time. There's no way of telling people that they are walking around shining like the sun. It was as if I suddenly saw the secret beauty of their hearts, the depths of their hearts where neither sin nor desire nor self-knowledge can reach, the core of their reality. The person that each one is in God's eyes. If only they could all see themselves as they really are. If only we could see each other that way all the time. This is an ignorant statement I'm going to make here. It's a statement I used to make a lot. I don't like apples. Now, why is that an ignorant statement? Well, it's about as ignorant as I don't like fish, as some people say, because there's hundreds of kinds of fish. Have you tasted them all? The same way with apples. Well, there's maybe not hundreds, but there's dozens of apples that a person can eat. And I found one finally I like. Honeycrisp. Honeycrisp apples. I like Honeycrisp apples. If you take a Honeycrisp apple, Paulette said to me, don't eat that whole thing during the sermon. First of all, it'll take too long. Secondly, they won't be able to understand you. But I'm going to cut the core out of this. In the core, there are some seeds. And I think in a Honeycrisp apple, there are about 8. 8 seeds. Can you count the seeds in an apple? What? Try it. You can count them. They're countable. There are not that many of them. So you just count them. There's an old-timer in my journey that used to say, you can't count the seeds in an apple, but you can count the seeds in an apple, but you can't count the apples in the seed. Right? Does that make sense? That's a piece of wisdom about potentiality. We just don't know what's in the core of a person. Unless we believe, like Merton, they are shining like the sun. So, is this floor clean? 5-second rule. There. The 5-second rule was one we adopted in Nigeria all the time. Taste and see that the Lord is good. If we don't see that our faces are shining like the sun, that we don't have at the core of our being the beauty of God, then we haven't gotten it yet. We're still pretty young in our salvation. And as we grow up, we don't just see that sun shining in our own faces, we see it in the faces of every other person. That's my affirmation anyway. It's a growth process that we go through. And I could go through my growth process in the Spirit and salvation just like you can. We're born. In my case, I felt a lot of belonging soon after I was born. I knew I was safe. But it wasn't long before the church, I've told you this, the church started to, and my family started to take that from me. They didn't mean to, but they made me feel like my belonging was trumped by right behavior. Then later, by right belief. That's all I can remember about my baptism. We had to fill in blanks. make sure we got it right about what this all meant. But the most significant thing about my baptism wasn't even about me. It was about my friend Chuck. He was the only one in our catechism class at age 13 who didn't choose to be baptized. Why would you guess I chose to be baptized at 13? Because it was expected of me. Chuck signed his sheet. He checked the thing. I am not ready to be a Christian yet, so I'm not going to be baptized. I said to him afterwards, what were you thinking? He said, my grandma made me check that one. That's awful. What does someone else have to say about me and, me or you, really, in the end? But besides that fact, we were too young. We didn't know what we were doing. Am I dissing my baptism? I am not. I believe God's a whole lot more powerful and mysterious than I can figure out. But my memory of it was not very profound. Except I remember the feeling of the water. In the Mennonite church, we used to sprinkle on my shoulders. I remember that. But nothing else. It was later, as I began to keep tipping that pitcher of God's gold over and over again, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, I began to slowly but surely begin to get it more and more, to grow up in my salvation, until some epiphanies happened in my own life to kind of seal the deal. But am I finished? Of course not. I'm still growing up in my salvation, and I trust that you are as individuals and a church as well. It starts with, what kind of flowers are these in this vase? Can you see it from where you are? They're zinnias. I remembered when the insight came to me some years ago about zinnias, what a wonderful symbol they are of what I'm talking about today. Rosemary, Elizabeth, he's in you. He's in you. He's in you. Can you believe that? He's in you. God is in you. He's part of your core being. And then as we grow up, we begin to flower that in our lives, hopefully, that others can see. There's an old rabbinic tale about the disciples of the rabbi who had the question, when can we tell that the dawn has come? I trust this will be familiar to some of you. And one of his students thought, I got an answer to that. It's when you can look into the distance and begin to distinguish a fig tree from an olive tree. That's when you know that the dawn has come. The rabbi said, good answer, but it's not the right one. Another disciple tried. Is it when I look into the distance and I can tell the difference between a sheep and a dog? No, that's not it either. The way you can tell that the dawn has come is when you look out and see anybody there as a brother or a sister. Because until that comes, you're still in the dark. I am with you today as an individual and part of this body. We're drinking, eating of that body and that blood symbolically, taking Christ into ourselves, nourishing our soul's health, seeking to grow up in salvation, using our eyes to see, as the psalmist said in Psalm 34, open your eyes and your face will shine like the sun. In my translation I use, you'll look to him and be radiant. But other translations say, look to him and you'll shine like the sun. Taste it. Taste him. See him. Feel him. Like John said once upon a time, our hands have touched the word of life. Smell. Like incense rising, be a fragrant offering. Smell that in your life. Didn't you talk about senses once? Back maybe 3 months ago. I don't know, sometime. Elizabeth talked about the senses. Use all your senses. Taste, see, feel, touch, smell. And surely you'll get it that the Lord is good. Not just to you, but to all of God's creation. I pray that we'll drink and eat today in that kind of spirit and that kind of hope. Amen.